Now, we have all watched Eliza McCartney at the Olympics, lining up, gripping her pole vault and staring down that runway with somehow a smile on her face. And of course, winning us that bronze medal in 2016. Right now, she is gunning for another Olympics, but that's not the only thing she's gunning for. I'm excited to say that Eliza joins me now. Hello, Eliza. Thank you so much for being here. And I know that everybody probably wants to talk to you about pole vaulting, but I actually want to talk to you about going meat-free or eating meat-free, because that's how we actually met.
Yes.
Was at my first ever plant-based meal the other night, and I saw you there and learnt that you're really into fighting climate change. So I thought we could talk about that. Just tell me a little bit about that.
Wow, oh my gosh, where to start? Well, basically, a while ago, a very long time ago, when I started university, I was doing a degree in physiology and I did like this elective paper in marine science, and it just blew my mind a little bit that accidentally stumbling on these issues about what was happening to our marine environment, and climate change obviously is associated with that I was learning that at tertiary level education, basically by accident, that I just chose this paper and that no one had taught me this before. And it kind of horrified me a little bit. And I kind of kept going down that path. I did a couple more papers and I ended up changing my degree to environmental science because it just felt so big and important to me that I felt like I needed to keep going with it and pursuing it. And so that kind of kick-started my passion and interest in Te Tai our environment, the whenua we have here in New Zealand. And it's kind of just snowballed a bit from there, and it's something that I care very, very deeply about. And like you said, go to some of these events and partner with some of these people to try and use my influence, I suppose, and my platform as an athlete to promote what I think is important.
And what worries you most about climate change? Because a lot of people get extremely anxious by it. Does it make you anxious? Does it worry you? What's your sort of personal vibe on it?
It makes me very angry.
It makes you angry?
It makes me very angry, and without getting into the politics of everything, it's deeply upsetting that we've got to this point, I think. And doing a degree can sometimes be incredibly depressing, learning about how all of these actions have led to this point. But on the flip side of this, and this is where I do like to stand, is on the optimism side, that we have the power to make a difference and to change things. So as much as I'm angry, I also try and be really positive about what to do, positive about what I can do, positive about what the world can do, and I try and use that as my kind of leaping off point. But in sport, personally, it's affecting athletics, it's affecting sport all around the world. We've got, extreme heat waves, we've got flooding, we've got extreme weather events, we've got wildfires. Sport is already being affected as well. So what I do for a living is also being impacted right at this moment, and I see the impact that has around the world. So it's very much entwined into my life.
Yeah, how is climate change affecting sport for a professional athlete?
Yeah, I mean, all of those things I just mentioned above. I mean, the last 2 or 3 major events we've had, Paris Olympics as an example, the heat was talked about quite a lot. Air conditioners had to be brought into the Olympic Village, things like that. We had a championships in Budapest the year before that. The heat was pretty extreme that we were competing in. The Tokyo Olympics as well, you had tennis players talking about being on the court and how dangerous the heat was. So heat's a really, really big one. And then also in pole vault, not many people would know this, but I use a black sticky grip on the pole, and that kind of breaks down. The more humidity there is, the more sweat I have on my hands. And so I've also got a little bit of a safety risk as well when it comes to extreme humidity and heat. So there's also the physiological response of your body just coping, but then I've got the ability to hold on to the pole. So there's so many, I could talk forever about, there's so many ways that a changing environment is affecting sport. And then on the flip side as well, sport is an industry that holds these big events that have, its own carbon footprint. I mean, I'm sure you can imagine the Olympics has a huge carbon footprint. So sport is very much, entwined in sustainability, and that's where I'm finding myself more and more kind of going into those routes and exploring.
Yeah, a couple of things there. I mean, the heat is actually affecting the way that you hold the pole vault and potentially your safety.
Yeah, in extreme cases, yes.
Yeah.
And obviously I've kind of worked out ways to get around it and to be safe, but it is something that I've certainly thought about a lot.
It's a really practical example, isn't it? And the carbon footprint, is that something, that athletes like yourself feel bad about, having to fly to events like the Olympics and have a big carbon footprint? Do you feel the guilt about that sometimes.
Yeah, it's really interesting because a lot of athletes, I think, are nervous to talk about this because they're afraid of being labelled a hypocrite, and I can totally understand that. Our jobs require us, particularly when you live in Aotearoa, our job requires us to fly quite far away and frequently. So it's definitely, we have a high carbon footprint being athletes, and particularly being athletes from a fairly affluent country like New Zealand, right? So yes, it is something that you have to consider, but we're also part of a bigger system here. And we're trying to live and work and operate in a system that's not designed to reduce carbon impact. And so it's pretty tough to put it also on the individual to be like, well, you can't do that, when the rest of the world is set up and society is set up in a way that makes us have to be part of that system if we want to have a normal job or be an athlete or whatever. So yes, there's obviously that part of me where I'm like, right, I've got a big carbon footprint. There's no denying that. But there is also other things that I can do that have an impact on a positive impact on climate change, on just sustainability in general that I can do. And that's one of the things that I really care about, is trying to get that message out there, talk about it, show people what you can do, be a part of solutions rather than being so caught up in the negative and the depressing and the guilt of it all.
Yeah, that's right. You could be caught up with that, or you could offset it with positivity. Is that what you try to do? Is that what you try to do?
Yeah, that's what I try to do. It's not easy at times. But yes, it is something that I've actively worked on for a while. One of the biggest ones actually is that being athletes, we obviously have a lot of influence. We're role models. We have platform. There's, however many millions or billions of sports fans around the world. So thinking really carefully about who I partner with, what I'm promoting on my channels, those sorts of things is one of the ways I've started to weave in these ideas into what I do.
And are there practical things that you do as well? We tried plant-based eating the other night. Are there things like that you work into your life that you'd be happy to share with others?
Yeah, there's definitely lots of little individual impacts. When you care about these things, you can't not help. But once you learn about something, you're like, oh, I should really be doing that, and it just keeps going in a positive way. So yeah, of course, reducing the amount of meat and dairy I eat, I've definitely done that. I'm not vegetarian, but I certainly try and eat a lot less. I do things like grow my own food and compost it, and I don't know, there's all sorts of little small things like that. But some of the bigger impacts I think individuals can have is, one, talking about it, what we're doing today, it's great. Talking about it's really, really important. Things like where your Kiwi saver is. Is it in a fund that's, funding polluters or funding fossil fuels? Things like that are also really powerful things individuals can do as well. So
you've been careful with what you do with your Kiwi saver?
Yeah, I do think about these things, and about, if I'm choosing to invest money, like Kiwi saver, where am I investing it? So those are also really powerful things that individuals can do as well. And probably the biggest thing, which everyone probably hates to hear, is who you vote for. And those, local elections, obviously the country's elections, all those sorts of things are really powerful things that individuals can do.
Yeah, I don't think people don't want to hear about that. It's pretty important. So politics is important to you. You vote in a certain way.
Yeah, absolutely.
How do you vote?
It's probably not a surprise that I'm usually a Green supporter, and I do definitely think about these things when I'm voting. It's probably my number one priority, and then there's probably other things as well, of course. But,
you're a Green voter. That's probably no surprise from this conversation, but would you like to go further? And, once you're done with athletics, would politics and that kind of leadership be an option for you?
I've asked this quite a lot.
This is a very real question.
No, and I'm asked it quite a lot. To be honest, I don't think the world of politics is probably for me. I'm happy in the world of, like you put, leadership is you can be a leader in politics, but you can also be a leader in other areas, and I suspect other areas is probably more my forte. I don't think I quite have the knack for being a politician. I think it looks pretty intense, but I would like to be able to be, continue that ability to be a role model. It's an incredible privilege that sport has offered me.
Yeah, but even speaking so openly about politics is relatively unusual for an athlete. To say that they support a particular party. You've got no shame in saying that you're a Green supporter.
No. No, not at all. I mean, it's pretty obvious. I think people would be able to deduce it anyway, so there's probably no point beating around the bush. But as an athlete, I tend to find most of my life is pretty open anyway, so it's just another component.
And another thing I noticed about you was, you speak pretty good te reo Māori. I watched you at the Olympics. Have you been learning it? Can you speak it? What? Tell me more about this.
Yeah, well, I actually started learning in high school. My mother, who's a doctor, said I should take a step back. I wanted to study medicine when I was younger. I was very science-based, as you can probably still imagine. I did an environmental science degree. I'm very science-based, and I wanted to be a doctor. My mother said, well, if you want to be a doctor in Aotearoa, Māori is the only language you need to learn at school, and so that's what I did. And I really am so pleased that she said that, because I think that is something I really believe in as well, for so many reasons. But doing my degree, I also learnt how much te ao Māori, so the Māori worldview, and how cultural practices and tikanga play into such important things when it comes to sustainability in our country. And the collaboration of science and of te ao Māori is actually a really important collaboration. And then with that te reo Māori, you can't really learn a culture without learning their language. And the Māori language is so intertwined with nature. Like, everyday metaphors are just about nature, about, like, if someone's a good singer, you'd say, he korokoro tui ia, like she has a throat of a tui. So it's just all embedded in nature, and that worldview, I think, is so integral to how we're going to progress forward with climate change, with all sorts of environmental issues. So there's many reasons that I've been learning te reo Māori, but yeah, it certainly ties into that narrative as well.
Yeah, and I said that we weren't going to talk about pole vault, and there isn't much time, but one thing that lots of people know about you is that you made an amazing comeback through all sorts of injury difficulties going across, well, many, many years. Can you just let us inside, where does that resilience come from? What do you draw on to get through something like that?
I'm an individual athlete for a reason. I think there is that kind of innate resilience that comes with having to be an individual athlete, but a lot of it has been learnt. It's not necessarily all something. I mean, people look at that and various other examples and think, wow, that must just, you must be so strong. I've had to work so hard for this. I've had to work incredibly hard. It has not been easy. There's been a lot of time spent with mental skills, with sports psychologists, with clinical psychologists. Like, it takes a lot of work to be resilient. It's not always something that comes naturally, and it hasn't always come naturally to me. But the work has, thankfully, I can say, paid off, where I've been able to move through that. Like you said, I've been able to come back last year, compete at the Olympics. I'm feeling really good about the next 4 years as well. So it has taken work, but I think it's one of those things, when you love what you do and when you enjoy it, you have the motivation to put the work in and to do what you kind of have to. And ultimately, it's a benefit for yourself if you're able to work through that process.
Totally. And just before we come to the final question, which is advice for other Kiwi, in terms of, te ao Māori, speaking te reo, what's your vibe on the treaty debate? Is that something that you've...
Very political.
Yeah, but what, it sort of fits with everything we've been talking about. You're open to saying what your vibe is about, everything that's going on with Te Tiriti?
I think all that probably needs to be said is that I think of myself as tangata tiriti, so a person of the treaty, because I'm Pākehā, and that's how I see myself, and I think the treaty has a huge place in our country, so I absolutely support being tangata tiriti and supporting Māori, and that's a little bit of a probably not surprising given what we've been talking about, but that's how I feel, yeah.
Sure, and finally, Eliza McCartney, we ask all of our great Kiwi who come in here for some advice for other Kiwi, just anything from their life. What would it be?
Well, what we touched on before about loving what you do, being able to let you get through difficult times. I think people look at athletes or various other artists or whatever and think, well, it's easy to say you love what you do because of what you do. But I think it's not always that way. Sometimes loving what you do can't be passive. You have to explore that and make it happen sometimes. So I think for anybody out there, you have the opportunity to love what you do. And if you do love what you do get through these difficult times. You have the motivation, you have the resilience, you have the drive to, because it will get difficult at times, right? So the love is what gives you that resilience. So if there's any advice I could give, it'd be either love what you do or work out how to love what you do, and that will get you through.
Eliza McCartney, great advice. Have a brilliant day. You're a great Kiwi.
Thank you.